It was a bright, sunny afternoon in the middle of a busy city park. Families were enjoying the day, children were running around laughing, and the sound of birds mixed with distant chatter filled the air. People from all walks of life were there. Some walking their dogs, others sitting quietly on benches reading or simply watching the world go by. The park was a place where different kinds of people met, and for the most part, they got along or ignored each other in peaceful silence. Among the crowd was a man named Marcus. He was in his early 30s, tall and calm-looking, with a kind face that carried both confidence and patience. Marcus enjoyed these moments in the park. It was a place where he could relax after a long week of work. On this particular day, he had come to the park to clear his mind, enjoy the sunshine, and maybe catch up on some reading under a large oak tree. As Marcus found a spot near a bench, he noticed a woman sitting there. She was middle-aged, dressed in a bright yellow dress, with short curly hair and glasses perched on her nose. She seemed to be watching the people around her, but her eyes kept drifting toward Marcus in a way that made him feel uneasy. He tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the book in his hands. Suddenly, without any warning, the woman spoke loudly enough for nearby people to hear. "Why don't you just go back to Africa? You don't belong here." The words hit the air like a sharp arrow, surprising not only Marcus but also those who were within earshot. For a moment everything around seemed to stop. The laughter, the birds, even the rustling of the trees. The woman's statement was clear, loud, and filled with hatred. It was a phrase that carried a history of racism, discrimination, and pain. Marcus looked up slowly, meeting her eyes calmly. There was no anger in his face, only a deep, quiet strength. Around them, people started to pay attention. Some stopped their activities and turned toward the confrontation, curious and uncertain about what would happen next. The atmosphere shifted. What had started as a peaceful afternoon in the park was now charged with tension. The woman repeated, her words, louder this time, as if she wanted to provoke a reaction. "Go back to Africa. This is not your home." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He took a deep breath and stayed silent for a few seconds. The crowd around began to whisper, some in shock, others in disapproval, but no one dared to interrupt yet. Many felt uncomfortable. Racism was something people hoped to leave behind, but here it was, right in front of them, clear and ugly. The woman's tone grew harsher, but Marcus stayed composed. He knew that reacting with anger would only escalate the situation. He was aware that she wanted to get a rise out of him, to humiliate him, or make him angry. But Marcus believed that fighting hate with hate would never solve anything. Around them, a few people started moving closer, curious but cautious. A young couple walking by stopped and looked toward the scene. A man sitting on a nearby bench closed his book and watched carefully. The woman's harsh words had become the center of attention, and everyone wondered how Marcus would respond. Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I'm here because this is my home. I was born and raised here. This country is part of me, just like it is for you." His words surprised the crowd. They expected anger or silence, but not this simple, honest statement. The woman blinked, caught off guard by his calmness and confidence. For a moment she looked uncertain, as if she hadn't thought about the truth behind her words. People around started to murmur quietly, some nodding in agreement with Marcus. Others still looked shocked by what had happened. A few began whispering to each other about how rude the woman was and how strong Marcus seemed. Despite the growing attention, Marcus didn't want to make this about a fight. He looked at the woman and continued softly. "We all belong here, no matter where our ancestors came from. What matters is who we are now, and how we treat each other." The woman's face tightened. It was clear she hadn't expected this response. She looked around, realizing many people were watching and judging her. Some of the onlookers quietly expressed support for Marcus by clapping or saying, "That's right." The tension started to fade, But the woman wasn't ready to back down. She stood up abruptly, her voice trembling. "You don't understand. This country was made for people like me, not you." Marcus looked at her one last time. He shook his head slowly and said, "This country was built by people of all colors and backgrounds. We are all part of its story." At that moment, a young boy standing nearby stepped forward. He was about 10 years old, holding his mother's hand, and looked up at Marcus with wide eyes. "You're right," he said softly. "We all belong here." The crowd smiled, and some people started to cheer quietly. The woman, realizing she had lost the argument, muttered something under her breath and walked away quickly, leaving the park and the crowd behind. Marcus watched her leave, then turned back to the people who had gathered. He smiled gently and said, "Let's remember that respect and kindness are what make a community strong." That day, something small but important happened in the park. A hateful comment was met not with anger, but with dignity and truth. The people who witnessed the event carried the message with them, reminding everyone that the fight against racism begins with standing calm and strong in the face of hate. For Marcus, it was just another day, but for the others, it became a moment to think about their own actions and beliefs. The park returned to its usual calm, but the memory of that conversation stayed alive, a quiet reminder that words have power, and how we choose to respond can change the world around us. After the woman's harsh words hung heavily in the air, Marcus stood quietly for a moment. His heart beat steadily, but inside, he was reflecting deeply. He knew this was not just about one insult, it was a reflection of something much bigger: prejudice and misunderstanding that many people carried within themselves. Yet Marcus also understood that responding with anger or fighting back would only make the situation worse. His choice was to respond with calmness and wisdom. The crowd that had gathered was still watching intently. Some people were eager to see if Marcus would lose his temper, while others hoped he would say something that would make them think. Marcus realized the eyes of strangers, neighbors, and even those who would never see this moment were on him now. He took a deep breath, and slowly, carefully, he began to speak. "First," he said, his voice steady but kind, "I want to say that I understand where your fear comes from. Sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand. But fear should never become hate." His words were soft, but they carried weight. The woman looked at him, surprised that instead of attacking her, he was trying to connect with her. The people around them quieted down even more. Marcus's voice grew a little stronger as he continued. "I was born here. This is my home, just like it is for you. My family has lived in this country for generations. We have built, worked, and contributed to this community. When you tell me to go back to Africa, it shows that you don't know my story." Some people in the crowd nodded slowly. Marcus's response wasn't just about defending himself, it was about breaking a wall of misunderstanding. He wanted the people around to hear the truth behind the prejudice. "History," he said, "is complicated. Our country has a painful past with slavery and racism. But we also have a future that belongs to all of us. We are all connected, whether by blood, by shared dreams, or by hope for a better tomorrow." Marcus's calm and thoughtful words began to change the mood. The woman's angry face showed signs of confusion. She wasn't used to being met with respect when she spoke with hate. Most people would have shouted back or walked away, but Marcus stood his ground with quiet strength. He looked directly into her eyes and said, "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to build bridges, not walls. When we respect each other's stories and struggles, we become stronger together." The crowd was moved. Some people were wiping tears from their eyes. They could see the courage it took for Marcus to keep his calm in such a difficult moment. A few younger people whispered among themselves, inspired by the way Marcus handled the situation. It was a lesson in patience and understanding. Marcus continued, "You see, racism doesn't just hurt the person it's aimed at. It hurts All of us. It divides communities, creates fear, and stops us from growing. But when we listen and learn from each other, we can heal. As he spoke, a woman in the crowd clapped softly, encouraging him. Others joined in, some quietly saying, "Amen," or "That's right." It was a small but powerful moment of unity in the middle of a tense situation. The woman who had shouted at Marcus looked around, now realizing she was losing the support of the crowd. Her voice lowered as she tried to respond, but Marcus gently interrupted. "It's okay to have questions," he said, "and it's okay to feel afraid. But hatred will never be the answer. We have to choose love and respect if we want to live peacefully together." Marcus's words touched many people. A teenage boy stepped forward, looking up at Marcus with admiration. "You're really brave," he said softly. Marcus smiled warmly. "Bravery isn't about fighting. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. And it's about kindness, even when others are unkind." The woman who had been so angry slowly began to quiet down. She looked embarrassed now, maybe even ashamed, as the crowd began to cheer quietly for Marcus. She didn't have any more words to say. Instead, she gathered her things and left the park. Her steps hurried and heavy. Marcus watched her go, then turned back to the people around him. "Let this be a reminder," he said, "that every person has a story worth hearing, and every person deserves respect. If we can remember that, even in difficult moments, we can change the world, one conversation at a time." The crowd began to disperse, but many lingered a little longer, talking quietly among themselves. They felt inspired by what they had just witnessed, a moment of true courage, wisdom, and grace in the face of hate. Marcus picked up his book again and smiled to himself. He knew this moment would stay with him, but more importantly, he hoped it would stay with the people who had listened. It was a small step toward a better future, where people could live without fear of prejudice, where kindness could replace hate. That day in the park became more than just a random encounter. It became a story of hope, reminding everyone that how we respond to hate matters. Marcus showed that even when faced with racism, patience, understanding, and strength could change hearts and minds. And in that simple act of calm resistance, Marcus made a difference, not just for himself, but for everyone who was there to see it. As Marcus spoke with calm and strength, the atmosphere around him began to change. What had started as a tense moment filled with anger and shock slowly shifted into something much more powerful. The people who had gathered in the park were no longer just silent onlookers. They were becoming part of the moment, part of something that was bigger than any one person. At first, many of the bystanders were unsure what to do. Some had stopped walking or talking to watch the confrontation unfold, but they were nervous and uncomfortable. They didn't know whether to step in, to speak up, or just to leave. Racism is something many people want to avoid because it feels complicated and painful. But now, hearing Marcus's words, some of them felt something new. Hope, a woman sitting on a nearby bench, wiped her eyes quietly. She was an older lady with silver hair and a gentle face. She had seen many things in her life, but this was different. She looked at Marcus and felt proud that someone could respond to hate with such dignity. "That's the way to do it," she whispered to herself. A young man standing nearby shifted his weight and nodded slowly. He was in his early 20s, dressed casually in jeans and a hoodie. He had been scrolling on his phone before, but Marcus's words caught his attention. "It's not about fighting back with anger," he thought. "It's about showing strength in a different way." Around them, people started talking quietly to each other. Some whispered, "Did you hear what he said? So calm, so strong." Others were shaking their heads, disappointed in the woman who had started the confrontation. A few children nearby looked up, sensing the seriousness of the moment even if they didn't understand all the words. Slowly, a murmur of agreement began to grow. Someone in the crowd clapped softly, and then another person joined in. Soon the applause grew louder. It wasn't a celebration in the usual way, but a sign of respect. Respect for Marcus, for his bravery, and for the message of kindness and unity he was sharing. One of the onlookers, a middle-aged man wearing glasses, stepped forward hesitantly. "I just want to say," he began, "that what you said is important. We need more people like you. It's easy to respond with anger, but you showed us a better way." Marcus smiled gently and nodded. He wasn't looking for praise, but he understood the power of words, especially when they inspired others. "Thank you," he said softly. "We all have a responsibility to stand against hate, in whatever form it takes." Another woman from the crowd, younger and full of energy, spoke up next. "I've been thinking about how often people stay quiet when they see something wrong. Maybe because they're scared or unsure. But today, seeing how you handled this, it makes me want to speak up more." The crowd was now fully engaged. They began sharing their own stories, moments when they had witnessed or experienced unfair treatment, times when they had stayed silent but wished they hadn't. The conversation moved from the confrontation to a larger discussion about respect, kindness, and the importance of standing up for what is right. Even some of the people who had been quiet before started nodding in agreement. It was as if Marcus's response had opened a door for everyone to see things differently. The woman who had insulted Marcus was no longer the focus. Instead, the focus was on the community coming together, learning from each other, and moving forward. Children played nearby, but some stopped to listen. They may not have understood all the words, but they could feel the meaning behind them. They saw adults treating each other with respect and kindness, even in difficult moments. That image would stay with them as they grew up, teaching them lessons about empathy and courage. A local teacher who was walking through the park pulled out her phone and quietly recorded part of the conversation. She planned to share it later with her students, hoping it would inspire them to think about how they treat others. "This is a teaching moment," she thought. "Real life. Real courage." As the crowd began to disperse, many people stopped to thank Marcus personally. Some shook his hand, others offered warm smiles or kind words. They told him how much they appreciated his calm and wise approach. Marcus accepted their thanks humbly, knowing the real work was still ahead. For Marcus, the moment wasn't about being a hero. It was about showing that hate could be answered with love, and that strength didn't always mean shouting louder or fighting harder. Sometimes, strength was standing firm in your beliefs and responding with kindness when others expected anger. The event in the park quickly became more than just a local story. People shared it on social media, and the video of Marcus's response spread to many parts of the city and beyond. It inspired conversations in homes, schools, and workplaces about how to handle racism and discrimination with dignity. Marcus's story reminded people that everyone has the power to change the world, even in small ways. One calm, thoughtful response could ripple out and touch many lives, encouraging others to stand against hate and choose understanding instead. The crowd's reaction that day was proof of the power of community. When people come together to support respect and kindness, hate loses its strength. The park returned to its peaceful state, but the memory of that moment stayed alive in the hearts of those who witnessed it. From that day forward, the park was not just a place for relaxation, it became a symbol of hope and courage. Marcus's response showed that even in the face of hate, people could choose to be better, to listen more, and to build a future where everyone belongs. After the woman stormed away, leaving the park and the crowd behind, a quiet stillness settled over the place. The tension that had been thick just moments before began to dissolve into thoughtful silence. Marcus stood alone for a moment, looking out at the trees swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. Around him, people who had witnessed the scene were beginning to gather in small groups, talking quietly about what had just happened. Marcus took a deep breath. Though the situation was difficult and painful, he felt calm. His words had reached people, and that was what mattered. But more than that, he wanted to share why he had chosen to respond the way he did, why he had not shouted back or walked away, why instead he had stayed calm and spoken with kindness and strength. A few people approached him cautiously, curious to hear more. Among them was the young man in his early 20s who had been watching from the beginning. "Marcus," he said quietly, "why did you choose to answer her like that? Why didn't you get angry?" Marcus smiled gently. "I understand why people get angry," he replied. "But anger doesn't always solve problems. Sometimes it makes things worse." When I heard those words, I remembered all the pain they carried, but I also remembered that I have a choice in how I respond. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want to be part of the solution, not the problem. If I responded with anger, it would only add more hate to the world. Instead, I chose to respond with calm and truth. That can be more powerful." People nodded thoughtfully, listening intently. Marcus went on, "We live in a world where hate exists, but love and respect are stronger. When we respond with kindness, even in the face of hate, we can change the way people think. Sometimes, all it takes is one conversation to open a door." A woman nearby, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "It's hard, though. I don't know if I could be that calm if someone said those things to me." Marcus looked at her kindly. "It's not easy. It takes practice and patience, and it starts with understanding yourself, knowing your own worth and not letting someone else's ignorance shake your peace." He looked around at the faces of those who had gathered. "I want everyone to remember that we have the power to choose how we respond. We can choose hate or love, fear or courage." The young man who had asked the question smiled. "I think you've given me something important to think about. Maybe I'll try to respond differently next time I face hate." The conversation grew as more people joined. They talked about their own experiences with discrimination or unfair treatment. Some shared stories of when they had been silent but wished they had spoken up. Others talked about moments when kindness had made a difference in their lives. As the sun began to lower in the sky, the park felt alive with hope. The event that had started with anger and hate had become a lesson in humanity. Marcus listened and shared his thoughts, encouraging everyone to keep the conversation going even after they left. Later, Marcus sat down on a bench, reflecting on the day. He knew the woman's words were only one small example of the challenges many faced every day, but he believed that moments like this mattered. They were moments where the story could change, where hate could be met with understanding, and where people could see each other's humanity. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to a close friend, explaining what had happened and how he felt about it. His friend responded quickly, saying, "You were amazing today. You showed what true strength is." Marcus smiled. It wasn't about being praised. It was about making a difference, even in a small way. News of the incident began to spread. Some people in the community shared the story on social media. Videos of the encounter captured by bystanders were posted online. Comments poured in from people all over, many expressing support and admiration for Marcus's calm and powerful response. The story reached local news outlets, who invited Marcus to talk about the experience. He agreed, hoping that sharing his message with a wider audience could help inspire others to respond to hate with love and patience. In interviews, Marcus emphasized the importance of education and empathy. "We need to understand the history that shapes people's fears and prejudices," he explained. "But we also need to teach kindness and respect from an early age. It's how we build a better society." His words resonated with many. Schools started organizing discussions about racism and respect. Community groups held meetings to talk about how to stand up against discrimination. The park where the incident happened became a place for peaceful gatherings and conversations about unity. For Marcus, the experience was a reminder that change takes time. It's not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet and steady, like a small ripple in a lake that spreads further than anyone can see. He continued to live his life with patience and courage, knowing that each day offers a chance to make the world a little better. The memory of that afternoon in the park stayed with him, a moment when hate was met, not with hatred, but with the power of calm, honest words. Marcus believed deeply that every person has the ability to choose kindness, even when faced with ignorance, and that choice, made again and again by individuals, could create a future where respect and understanding replace fear and hate. The lesson he shared that day was simple, but powerful. Hate can be spoken by anyone, but how we respond defines who we are. Choosing love, courage, and calm can silence hate and inspire hope. As the park grew quiet again and the sun set behind the trees, Marcus knew the journey was just beginning. But he felt hopeful. Hopeful because people had listened, because the crowd had changed, and because one man's calm response had sparked a conversation that might just change the world. After the incident in the park, life slowly returned to normal for Marcus and the people who had witnessed what happened. But the impact of that day did not fade quickly. Instead, it grew stronger, like the roots of a tree reaching deeper into the earth. The moment had planted a seed of hope, courage, and change. Marcus knew that a single moment of calm and kindness could not erase years of prejudice or hate overnight. But he believed that change always starts with small steps, one conversation at a time. And so, he continued living his life with the lessons he had learned that day. In the weeks that followed, Marcus found himself reflecting often on the power of words. He understood better than ever how words can hurt or heal, divide, or unite. The phrase the woman had shouted at him, "Go back to Africa," was filled with hate and ignorance, but Marcus's response had shown the crowd something different. It showed that dignity and respect could overcome even the harshest words. Marcus decided to share his experience more widely. He started visiting local schools and community centers, talking to young people about his story. He wanted to teach them the importance of empathy, patience, and courage in the face of hate. The message he shared was simple. No matter what someone says to you, you have the power to choose your response. In one school, Marcus spoke to a group of teenagers who were struggling with their own challenges around identity and acceptance. Many of them had faced bullying or discrimination. Marcus listened to their stories and then told them about his own experience. His calm voice and honest words inspired the students. They asked questions and shared their feelings openly. For many of them, Marcus's story was a turning point. "I want you to remember," Marcus told them, "that your worth is not defined by what others say or think. You are valuable just because you are you. When someone tries to bring you down with hateful words, it's okay to feel hurt. But never let those words change how you see yourself." The students nodded, some wiping away tears. Marcus's message was more than just about racism. It was about kindness, respect, and believing in yourself. Outside of school, Marcus also connected with local community leaders and organizations working to fight racism and promote unity. They invited him to speak at events and help organize workshops on diversity and inclusion. Marcus gladly accepted, knowing that real change happens when people come together and learn from one another. Through these experiences, Marcus grew as a person. He learned that courage isn't just about standing up in difficult moments. It's about living every day with integrity and kindness. He became more confident in his voice and his mission to spread understanding. The community around him began to change too. More people spoke out against hate and prejudice. Local businesses started diversity training programs. Neighbors who had never talked before began to have conversations about race, history, and respect. The park, where the incident had happened, became a symbol of hope and healing, a place where people gathered not only to relax, but also to share stories and learn from each other. One day, Marcus was invited to participate in a city-wide event focused on promoting peace and unity. He shared his story once again, standing in front of hundreds of people. His calm and honest words moved many hearts. After his speech, a woman from the audience approached him. She was middle-aged and looked sincere. "Marcus," she said, "your story touched me deeply. I realize now how important it is to listen and understand rather than judge. Thank you for showing us a better way." Marcus smiled. "Thank you," he replied. "It's never too late for any of us to learn and grow." Back home, Marcus's family supported him throughout this journey. His parents were proud of how he handled the situation and how he was using his experience to help others. They reminded him that while the world has its challenges, there is always hope when people choose kindness. At times, Marcus still faced moments of frustration. He knew prejudice still existed, and not everyone was ready to change. But he remembered the lessons from the park, that patience and persistence were key. He also discovered that his story gave strength to others. Messages from strangers poured in through social media, thanking him for inspiring courage and hope. Some shared their own stories of overcoming hate. Marcus felt a deep connection to these people, knowing that together they could create a better future. In quiet moments, Marcus would reflect on that day in the park. The anger, the crowd, the silence, and then the powerful response. It had changed him in many ways. It had taught him the power of calm in the face of chaos, the strength of kindness against hate, and the importance of speaking truth with respect. Marcus's journey became a reminder to everyone around him that real courage comes not from fighting fire with fire, but from lighting a candle in the darkness. His response had left the crowd speechless that day, but the story did not end there. It lived on in hearts and minds, inspiring people to choose empathy over anger, understanding over ignorance. The city where Marcus lived slowly became more aware, more connected. People remembered the moment in the park as a turning point, a moment when one man's dignity and calm showed the way toward a kinder, more inclusive future. And Marcus? He continued walking through life with a steady heart and a hopeful spirit, knowing that while hate may still exist, love and respect will always have the power to change the world. One person, one moment, one choice at a time.